Welcome to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books with Zibby. I'm the host, Zibby Owens. I am an author. My latest is Blank, pub date March 1st, a novel. I'm also a podcaster, obviously, a publisher, a bookstore owner, and so much more. If you love books, you're in the right place. In fact, we call it the Zibbyverse, or really, the LA Times called it the Zibbyverse, and we're going with it. Go to zibbyowens.com to learn more and follow me on Instagram at zibbyowens. Kennedy Ryan is the author of This Could Be Us. A Rita and Audie Award winner, USA Today bestselling author Kennedy Ryan writes for women from all walks of life, empowering them and placing them firmly in the center of each story and in charge of their own destinies. Her heroes respect, cherish, and lose their minds for the women who capture their hearts. Kennedy and her writings have been featured in Chicken Soup for the Soul, USA Today, Entertainment Weekly, Glamour, Cosmopolitan, Time, O Magazine, and many others. She is a wife to her lifetime lover and mother to an extraordinary son, and we talk all about her son in this episode. Welcome, Kennedy. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss your latest, This Could Be Us. Congratulations.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, so excited to have you. We got to meet in person at the LA Times Book Festival last year, which was so nice. And thanks for coming to the store. You have to come by in LA on your tour.
I will. My tour stop is Long Beach, so I have no sense of what that is, but
not too bad.
Okay. Maybe I'll make it by. But your whole team is always so amazing. So thank you guys for always being so supportive and sweet.
Oh my gosh. Well, Sherry and Diana on my team are absolutely obsessed. I think, they've been the biggest, particularly Diana has been like, you are like her number one author of all time type of thing.
We message.
You message? Okay, good. So
I enjoy it.
Oh, good. Before I did this podcast, I didn't realize that like it would actually really mean that much to authors to hear from individual fans. Like I thought like, oh, well, they must get that all the time. But it really makes a difference.
It really does. It means a lot. So especially when it's someone you respect. I mean, it means something all the time. But then when it's like people you really respect and who you look at the books they love and you're like, wow, you have great taste in books. And you're like,
oh, I love that. Okay, This Could Be Us.
Yeah.
Which is fabulous. Tell everybody what this is about. And I didn't read the previous book. So now I feel like, did I miss something? Like, anyway.
Oh, you know what? I have some behind me.
Okay. Now I'll have to go back.
Yes. So you read This Could Be Us, right?
Yes.
But you couldn't read Before I Let Go.
That's right.
I love that though, because it lives in the universe, the Skyland universe. Mm-hmm. That's the series. And it's three best friends and they all interconnect. But I really want someone to be able to come in at any point and read, and not feel like they missed something. So I'm glad that when you read This Could Be Us, which is Soledad's story, the second friend in the group, that you didn't feel lost.
Not at all.
The first book is Before I Let Go, and that's Yasmin's story. Very distinct. And for everyone who read, it's interesting because for everyone who read Before I Let Go, this book is very different than that one. And I had this like sense of, oh my gosh, I hope people aren't expecting that same thing. It deals a lot with mental health. She's going through a depression journey. Then the first book, and it's a little heavier. This book, it has some heaviness to it. It's a woman. I really think of it as a woman reclaiming her power. Mm-hmm. She is the domestic goddess. Like she is the one who throws all the parties. She has the best charcuterie board. She has the best recipe for vinaigrette. She is the opposite of me, by the way, Zibby. I am none of those things. But Soledad is. And she, she's incredibly intelligent, but she applies all of that to her home, and she sees her home as an industry, as her own conglomerate, and her children. She has three beautiful daughters, and she sees her purpose like as making sure that these women feel safe and that they grow up to be wonderful humans who impact the world in whichever way they decide. And that's enough for her, and I really wanted the three women in these books to feel very distinct. Like Yasmin she has kids and she runs a business, but the third friend, Hendrix, doesn't want kids, is completely into her career. And I wanted them all to be ascribed dignity and to be ascribed respect for their choices, which I think is really the the essence of what feminism is, you know? And so often I'm not seeing women who are stay-at-home moms really esteemed as like, this is an amazing choice. This is, a worthy purpose. This is not just, there's nothing lazy about it. And I really wanted Soledad to shine that way. So she's a stay-at-home mom, giving her whole life over to a family, supporting her husband, supporting her kids. And then her husband, I mean, ultimate betrayal. I get so many messages on TikTok about I wanna look at, her husband, ultimate betrayal. And he leaves their family in an incredibly vulnerable position. And she is in a place where she has to all of a sudden become the breadwinner, and still do all the things that still create the nurturing environment that she's wanted for her children. But she also realizes there's a lot of herself that she's lost. And so this is a romance novel, but it is also a romance with herself. It is definitely about a woman who is rediscovering parts of herself that she lost, especially as women. We're moms, we're wives, we're friends, we're sisters, but we are people, and so often like those things that make us individual and that make us special, those things that have always been inside of us, the dreams, the ambitions, all of that has often been subservient to all the other things that we've become. And so this is really about Soledad, like refinding herself, reclaiming her power, self-actualizing. In a romance novel, she's self-partnering, she's dating herself. At one point, she says, what would it look like if I was the love of my own life? And so I know a lot of people are like, is it a romance? And there is a love interest, but I really in this novel wanted to look at sisterly love. I wanted to look at friendship love. One of my favorite lines from the book is there aren't enough sonnets for friendship. And what that really means is so often we are putting so much emphasis on romantic love, which married 27 years, I get it. I love it, romantic love here to stay, but also esteeming sisterly love, friend love, love of yourself, which really has to start first, I think, to have a strong foundation for every other expression of love. So this is her journey, and I'm really excited for people to go on it with her.
Oh my gosh. I could listen to you talk all day. I'm just like, where's the popcorn? I just want to like kick my feet up and like listen to you go. You're like inspiring, like, holding up women and who are we and let's do this. Oh my gosh.
I want popcorn too, Zibby.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. Well, you have this whole part of the book that you're describing, but there's another whole part about autistic kids. There's the twins who are autistic. You have an autistic son. Yes. I actually just interviewed a woman named Paige Lale. I don't know if you know her. I want you two to do a book event. Maybe I could moderate or something. She wrote it when she was 21. Now she's like 23 about being undiagnosed autistic until she was 15. Right. But I read them back to back and I was like, I have to introduce these authors to each other. But that also was like a fascinating part of the book with the totally different. And I know it comes from personal experience. Could you talk a little bit about that and including that and how to balance even the two different storylines and all of that?
Yeah, it felt natural for me as far as balancing the storylines because the two boys, Adam and Aaron, they're twins, they're autistic, and they are the sons of the single dad who is our love interest, Judah Cross. Yes. And it felt to me, I know what you mean by like balancing the two, but it's such a part of who Judah is. And it's such an extension of how I built his character that it's like, as you get to know Judah, you have no choice but to get to know his sons because how he cares for them and how he loves them and how he parents is such a huge part of who he is. There's no way to get to know Judah without getting to know his boys. Yeah. And so you mentioned that I have a son who's autistic. Like I mentioned, I've been married for 27 years. He's now 23. So he was diagnosed when he was 2, so that's 21 years. So much has changed, in the landscape of autism. We had such a hard start. And some of that was circumstantial because people don't believe me. I mean, they're like, you would have to write this. My son was diagnosed with autism on a Thursday, and the next day my husband lost his job. And it just created this kind of devastating, like, not that we're devastated about him, but just all of your money drying up. And at that point, like, insurance covered absolutely nothing. So it was a tough time. And there was a lot that we were negotiating as a family. It tried us as a family, especially considering how it happened for us. It tried our marriage, So I have always had a heart for families who have children with autism and obviously actually autistic people. I now have an auction, autism auction that I run every April, which is Autism Awareness Month, in conjunction with Culture City to raise money for autism. Like I'm in, I'm an advocate. I used to run a foundation for families who have children with autism. It has been a huge part of my life's work, but I never merged these two passions, of advocacy and uplifting our community and serving our community any way that I could, a community that has embraced our family and been so good to our family, and my work as an author. Like, I never merged those. And I talk about in the author's note how I was hesitant. It's like, it's something that's so personal, but people have such distinct opinions about everything, with autism, even like how you refer to, is it autistic? Is it a person with autism? Is it, there's all these different ideas about how to be autistic. And I was hesitant because I always joke that my first rule of writing is Hippocratic: first, do no harm. And I never wanted to write something or do something that would be perceived as harmful to the community. Has been such a support to us. And I was always hesitant to write about it. And then when I got to this story, this guy, Judah, I had to break it out, and there's so much of this is going to sound weird. There's so much of my husband in Judah, as watching him grow as a parent, watching the patience that this life has forced on us. You become very patient and you become very compassionate. When you see people having a hard time in public, you don't jump to conclusions. You wonder, I wonder if they're dealing with some of the things that we're dealing with. It changes you. And I often think, like, I think this happened. Obviously, Miles has his own life. My son has his own life, his own path. This happened for his own journey, but I'm in his life, and it happened to us too. And I think it's made me a better mom. I think it's made me a better person, a better friend, and has done the same for my husband. And it was such a joy to write a man who is that dedicated to his kids. And that's what we see in Judah. It wasn't for me as much a research process with autism because I knew so much about it. It was more that autism is truly a spectrum condition. And I wanted to ensure that this story reflected not just our experiences, not just the experiences of a few people that I've encountered or families that we've assisted. I wanted a broad spectrum, a great cross-section of experiences. My son is, they used to call it more impacted. He's older, he's still with us. He's mostly nonverbal, needs a lot of support. There's no way that you would meet my son and not know there's something going on. But there are so many folks on the spectrum who you would meet them and it's pretty much like invisible, like it's something they can mask, whether it's sensory issues or whatever, and you might not ever know. But they also have challenges that need to be respected and supported. And I thought, from the twin perspective, because they're twin boys, I'm taking two people who are as genetically identical as possible. They're in the same house, they have the same parents, the same circumstances, and the way their autism plays out is completely different. And that was just a way for me to show how broad this spectrum is and how different it looks for everyone and how we should respect how it plays out for each individual. My background is journalism, so my creative process is always very heavily interview. That's just like muscle memory for me. So the first thing I'm doing once I'm writing one of the first things is drafting a list of who I'm going to talk to. And I knew that I talked to probably 10, 13 different autistic people and parents, actually autistic people and parents, interviews, great conversations, things that haven't happened for us and have happened for other people that, I incorporated into the story. And then another thing that I did that was really for me, like insurance and making sure, is I hired an actually autistic editor, meaning someone who actually has autism and is also an editor, reading from that perspective, making sure that I am giving those characters as much respect as possible, that all of the language that I'm using is ascribing dignity, is giving them personhood, is, all of that is not harmful. That was very important to me. So that was kind of like an added step this time, was hiring an actually autistic editor before it got to even my publisher. So there was a lot that I did around that just to take care of those boys and to take care of the representation, so that when a parent, or even more importantly than a parent, someone who's actually autistic is reading this book, doesn't feel hurt or harmed, but feels respected. So that was very important. And for people who don't have much experience with autism, for them to get kind of a glimpse into what it's like for a lot of our families and a lot of our challenges, but also a lot of our triumphs, and a lot of the things that are special in our families. I wanted people who don't have that experience to see it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Does it happen with identical twins that the autism plays out in very different ways, or does it present usually? It does?
It definitely does. Yeah, it definitely can. I mentioned that I used to run a foundation. I ran it for 10 years, actually. Started and ran a foundation. And we had several twins come through the programs, and they would be vastly different. There is a genetic component. We're still trying to understand everything that is going on with autism, just like with so many other conditions. But there's a genetic component. But you can I have dealt with families who have 4 kids, and all 4 kids have autism, and it looks different in each one of them. So,
wow. Well, the passion that you speak about this with is so inspiring, honestly. I mean, you have boundless energy, clearly. And
I do not, Zibby.
You do. You must.
It's under eye concealer.
No, I mean, to not just cope with your own family situation, but to run a foundation and do all these other things and be writing 8 million books. I mean, I don't know. So how did your own writing career dovetail with that time in your life when your husband lost his job? Where were you in terms of your writing and journalism and your books, and how has that all played out?
Right. So my background is journalism with an emphasis in PR, and I was working with a lot of nonprofits. I was also freelancing, writing for magazines. What I started really doing once the autism was a part of our life was I realized that everything became autism. Like, I started this foundation. Of course, I'm raising this beautiful boy who has autism, and I found myself on television talking about autism and writing for Chicken Soup for the Soul about autism, and writing in Mom magazine about autism. Everything was autism. And I needed something that was just my own, kind of like Soledad. You come to a place where you're like, what's mine? What is specifically what pleases me? Where am I finding personal joy? And there weren't a lot of places of that. It felt like everything was kind of consumed. And I remembered how much I loved reading romance. I grew up reading romance, and to my mother's chagrin. And then, when you get to college, a lot of times you're like, it's time for the serious books. And I stopped reading romance. I was at a really place where I needed something of my own. And I said, I'm going to start reading romance again. It brought me so much joy. I started reading romance again. And I was like, I am a writer, and I love romance. I wonder if I could. And I wrote, it's ironic, Zibby, because the first book I ever wrote is Before I Let Go, the one that's book 1 of this series.
Yep.
I wrote it 15 years ago, never planned to publish it. So it is not my debut novel. It is one my husband reminded me about 3 years ago. And it became kind of now it's going to be a television show. I'm like, honey, I owe it all to you. You know what I mean?
Wow.
But I just wrote that to see if I could. And I was like, it's not good. My husband was like, it really is. My sister said, it really is. I slid it under the bed, forgot about it. And then it's so funny because I would My son was, a lot of kids who have autism are obsessed with water play, watching water.
Mm.
And my son at that time in his life loved water. We would go to this river every day. It was like all the families that come to this river, we would go to this river and I'd sit on the riverbank and he'd play in the water. And this town called Rivermont started kind of like building in my mind, and I'd write a little bit of it every day. And that became my debut novel, was this story that built around this river. And I was still running the foundation. I got a book deal when I was 40 years old. It's never too late. That's when I got my first book deal. And I was doing it all for a while. I was writing, I was running the foundation. I was, still working with another nonprofit with journalism. And it just became a place where I was like, this is a lot. And really the reason I stopped running the foundation was redundancy.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that, I started at 20, we were 20 years ago when this was diagnosed. So little existed as far as services and, support. And now there's so much. And so what I saw was the things that I was providing are now provided by the government, and by other agencies. And so I decided that I would shut that down and really direct people toward larger organizations that were doing it much better than I was anyway. But I still wanted, to be a part of the community. So that's when I started, along with another author friend, Ginger Scott, the auction, the online book auction that we do every year. And so I continued writing. So that's kind of like where the journey kind of meanders, is being like in autism all the time and being consumed, really by that is what drove me back into reading, which led me to writing. And then when I'm writing, I'm always looking for how can I give back to autism? And it all just kind of, it merges. For me, the auction, which is every April with Culture City, is a great solution because it actually aligns with what I do for a living now.
Mm-hmm.
So I love it. Writing is my favorite thing that I've ever done. I always tell people that for me, writing is not, and I know this sounds so precious, writing is not for me just vocational. It feels like a calling.
Mm-hmm.
It feels to me like I was put on this earth to tell stories that will impact people.
Mm-hmm.
It feels for me like there's something so impactful about people seeing themselves in pages of fiction, seeing their experiences, especially when they aren't used to seeing it. Like, especially when you open a book and you're not used to seeing an autistic person who is, being ascribed dignity and navigating the world. And for me, especially when you're not used to seeing, Black women, who are doing these amazing things, who are being esteemed and loved on. And, I like, for marginalized groups, especially vulnerable communities, that's where I like to write, because we don't see ourselves enough in culture, portrayed in a way that's authentic, but also not stereotypical, positive, but not unreal. Like, I don't want to be, I'm not someone who likes to write characters that are, it has to be positive. It has to be, this can't be a villain. They can't be a this. I want to be authentic. I want to be real. So that's what I do.
That's amazing. So what advice do you have for aspiring authors?
Figure out why you want to write. I think it took me a while to figure out my why.
Mm-hmm.
And when you figure out your why, it really determines what you write. For me, it did. When I first started writing, the first books I wrote were great. Like, they're great. Sure they are. And it's the same craft. It's the same, if it's talent. But when I figured out that I really wanted to write about things that meant something to me, it changed what I wanted to write. It changed what felt like success to me. Because for me, success is first measured in impact. And I didn't know that when I first started. So I'm chasing what I thought meant success, whether that's making a list and selling lots of books and looking around at my friends and what's making them successful. And if you do those things and it's not yours, it's hollow. And that's just the most incredibly frustrating feeling, to put so much into the pursuit of something. And then when you get it, it means nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the advice, there's all kinds of like practical advice you can give, like, make sure you're, taking craft courses.
Yeah.
But for me, the soul level advice is know why you write. And for me, that affects everything. That affects what I write, who I write for, and what makes me, how I know that I'm successful. And it's not the metrics that other people prescribe.
Wow. Amazing. This is so amazing. What do you do to just like chill out when you're not book touring and writing and advocating and planning things and all of that? Give me something you do just like for
Zibby, I am such a boring person. I read. And when I'm writing, I don't get to read as much, but I am an audiobook girl, like give me the audiobook because I can multitask,
Yep.
So I've always been a voracious reader. I still am as much as I can be. I watch good television, I have my husband and it's sad, but like a lot of our quality time is spent watching television together,
That's not sad. I think that's very common. Yes.
We save our shows, like, okay, you can't watch this one without me. And then I have my family. I just moved recently back to North Carolina. We lived in Atlanta for like 20 years and I love Atlanta. It actually feels probably the most like home because our lives were there. But my son has never lived close to my family. And he, as I mentioned, is limited verbal, but the pandemic was very, very hard on us, very, very hard on us, as it was on so many families. And it was hard on me. And I was diagnosed with depression during the pandemic. And I was in Atlanta and we were, in this pressure cooker. And my son needs a lot of structure, no school, no services, it was hard, and I was going through a hard time. And my mom always knows, like, if you ever have a mom who always knows, you won't take it for granted because my mom always calls at the right time, always checks on me when I'm about to collapse, And we were on the phone and she said I had books due. In the pandemic, Miles was having a hard time. Everything was really, really hard and dark. And I didn't recognize at the time that I had depression, that I was depressed. And I had a panic attack on the phone. And my mom was here in North Carolina and she said, "That's it. I'm coming." She flew to Atlanta, was there the next day. She washed the clothes, she cooked the food, she made me go right and took care of my son. And, it was so much calm and peace. And my husband said, my mom was there a few days. He said, "We need to move home. We need to move home. We need support. We need family." My son would walk up to me and he would go, "Nana, granddaddy." He would name our family members, just like start naming them. And he was just in his way telling us, "I want my family." And so when you ask, what do I do? Like, there's so much joy I get in spending time with my family. We haven't lived close to them. We hang out, we laugh, we eat, we cook, we just have a good time. And I have not had extended family around me in 20 years, and so that's one of our joys now is spending time with our family. And like I said, reading. Like usually if I have bags under my eyes, it's because I stayed up too late reading. I'll write. And then it's late. And I'm like, I've been writing for hours. I should go to sleep. Can't shut my brain down. So I start reading a good book.
I can relate to that. Kennedy, you were so impressive. Your success, it just couldn't happen to a nicer person. So congratulations. And yeah, it's so nice to get to know you more.
Yes, absolutely. I hope I get to see you this year.
You too. Okay. Thanks so much for sharing.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.